Local authorities in China now admit property housing a church in Henan province belongs to the church. The admission came after the pastor's wife was killed when workmen attempted to demolish the church building. On April 14th, Ding Tui Mei was buried alive as she tried to shield the church from bulldozers. China's aide, Bob Fu, said authorities made the right decision to resolve the land dispute, but he says those responsible for Ding's death must be held accountable and a fair investigation must be conducted for justice to prevail.
A man wearing a panda costume and a surgical mask sparked a bomb scare at a Baltimore TV station. Police shot the man yesterday after he allegedly threatened to blow up the building. 25-year-old suspect Alex Breezy is expected to survive.
Diplomacy in action, albeit in Turkey. A brawl erupted during a constitutional meeting. The issue at hand, this is very telling. Now, you look at that. Haymakers being thrown. The issue at hand here, removing lawmakers' immunity from prosecution. Look at how said lawmakers respond. The catalyst, again, for the fight was a request to move to a larger room because there weren't enough seats for everyone. Everyone, again, concerned about the potential loss of immunity from prosecution. A hockey game broke out.
Target is in the bullseye. A Mississippi organization is calling for a boycott of the retail giant because of its transgender bathroom policy.
People have their own beliefs and stuff, but what could it hurt?
Shoppers in Jackson are split over Target deciding to allow anyone to use any bathroom they choose.
You have man parts, you go to a man bathroom, and if you have lady parts, you go to a lady bathroom. That's my take on it.
I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I think everyone should be able to go to whatever bathroom they need to go to. I mean, I don't know, I just don't get it.
The American Family Association, based here in Mississippi, disagrees. According to AFA President Tim Wildman, quote, "This means a man can simply say he feels like a woman today and enter the women's restroom even if young girls or women are already in there." More than 750,000 people have already signed an online boycott petition since the Christian group based in Tupelo started it last week.
I'm not one to boycott because I feel like there's many other things in the world that we still support that we don't even know that stuff goes on.
Last week, Target made a statement they will allow shoppers and employees to use whichever restrooms or fitting room facility that fits their gender identity.
If they're comfortable in there and everybody's comfortable with it, which I am, as long as they don't bother me, I won't bother them.
The cheerleading team at the University of Washington got a lot of heat on social media after they posted the do's and don'ts of how young girls should look for their upcoming tryouts. For example, the body do's include being physically fit with an athletic physique, having nude or no fingernail polish, and being tan. Some of the attire don'ts include no colors other than solid black, no tops that cover the midriff. Critics say the poster encourages body shaming over ability. As a result, the school's athletic department took down that picture.
Moving on now, a teenager has been killed and at least 10 wounded in fresh shootings in Chicago. The 16-year-old boy died on the scene after being shot in the head. Those wounded, including a police officer, were shot in separate incidents on Monday. Police are investigating the shootings. Over the weekend, 6 people were killed and at least 39 injured in shootings across the city. This was the most violent weekend in Chicago since last September, when 4 people were killed and 53 were injured. Over 1,000 people have been shot in Chicago so far this year.
The relationship between the police and the public can't go on the way it is.
One veteran beat cop talked to us about whether the law gives police officers the benefit of the doubt.
I don't think that cops are killer cops. I don't think they're trigger happy. I think if we could get away from those words, we could then begin to talk about, okay, why are these things happening?
The officer who was involved, he's on routine administrative leave.
The recent non-fatal shooting of a 13-year-old holding a fake gun came days after a settlement was announced in the case of Cleveland's Tamir Rice.
When police are wrong, we are held to a higher standard and we are prosecuted.
12-year-old Rice was holding a toy pellet gun when he was shot and killed by Officer Timothy Lohman in 2014.
Do you think that Officer Lohman should have been indicted by the grand jury?
No, I don't. as someone that could be in that situation, I think of that cop, you know, and I say to myself, what is he going through? You know, he's sitting, that cop is sitting at home, playing that tape in his head.
Probably a juvenile, you know?
Over and over and over again. And he probably will the rest of his life.
So what is to blame?
I don't know that you can blame one or the other. I think that it's like worlds colliding. That's where problems do come in, is when an officer doesn't take the time or take the effort to try to understand a community. And a community doesn't take the time to understand what an officer represents, or who he is, and that he's a human being too.
We must love and support each other.
The relationship with, I guess, police and race is a tough relationship.
What about Black Lives Matter? Their protests have garnered a lot of attention over the past few months.
It did, and every life matters. You know, I think they're you know, putting people against the police almost, and our reaction times a split second.
But your training provides you with the tools to make those split-second decisions. So is it a flaw in the training system that allows for controversial shootings?
The training is good, but police work is, I don't think it's not an exact science. Nobody calls the police because the day's going great. No one's calling you over to the house to say, hey, things are great today. They're calling you there because it's a problem.
Shots fired out here. Shots fired. Shots fired.
You know, I always say in police work, you have to have a healthy fear. A healthy fear. You need to know what can happen, but you can't always assume that it is.
Have you ever regretted becoming a cop?
Congratulations.
Sometimes I look at my brothers that are in the corporate sector and I say, well, you know, it might be a little easier going to work there than, you know, being under this microscope all the time, you know? But I've never regretted being a cop. We're not perfect. We're not the enemy. And we're trying real hard to do the best we can.
It didn't take long for German Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier to react to Donald Trump's America First rhetoric. Steinmeier said, "The world's security architecture has changed, and it is no longer based on two pillars alone. It cannot be conducted unilaterally. No American president can get round this change in the international security architecture." Steinmeier, a Bilderberg attendee, is referring to the New World Order rollout of the United Nations infestation of the United States local police force with its Strong Cities network, announced by the U.S. Constitution circumventing Attorney General's office to the United Nations in 2015, no less. Furthermore, is it any wonder why the Strong Cities network recognizes constitutionalists as their #1 threat? And just what kind of force is behind Lynch's words? The UN houses the permanent delegations of the Sharia law enforcing Organization of Islamic Cooperation. The OIC, as it's known, is overseeing the cancerous expansion of Sharia law with the assistance of the United Nations, the EU, and the federal government of the United States, utilizing waves of immigrants to force European and American cities to submit to the eventual one world order. The OIC is based in Astana, the capital city of Kazakhstan. Astana is a planned 21st century New World Order city by all accounts, meaning its array of one world government promoting structures were built with the Kazakhstan's petrodollars to act as the headquarters for the emerging New World Order takeover. Kazakhstan is led by Nursultan Nazarbayev, by all accounts a human rights violating dictator that has ruled over Kazakhstan for nearly 26 years. Under Nazarbayev, as CBS reported in 2011, severe limits on political freedoms and freedom of speech, detainee and prisoner abuse, arbitrary arrest and detention, particularly of government opponents, lack of an independent judiciary, pervasive corruption, discrimination and violence against women, and trafficking in persons are typical of Nazarbayev's rule. A recent New York Times story claims Nazarbayev's regime has been paying Washington, D.C. think tanks to issue glowing reports on the country that largely ignore its glaring shortcomings in political freedom and human rights, and that the Nazarbayev regime has even been alleged to have made illegal payments to as yet undetermined members of Congress seeking to gain their favor. Basically, a 21st century occultic hub run by a New World Order dictator with his hands in the pockets of your elected leaders, is the epicenter of the Islamic Sharia movement exploding in Europe and quietly invading the United States.
Should Sharia law be over the U.S. Constitution?
Yes. The U.S. Constitution, which is made by people, and the Sharia law is made by Allah, so that is all the way above. That has to be definitely in the land, not for the America, for the whole world would be above.
So that should be above the U.S. Constitution.
Yes.
This isn't a drill. The engineered collapse of civilization is well underway.
Studies show millennials are less religious than their parents ever were, and that's a cause for concern among some of America's leaders.
Despite our Judeo-Christian roots, fewer Americans are identifying as Christians, while the number of Americans with no religion is growing at a record pace. Pew Research first surveyed more than 35,000 Americans about their religious views in 2007, then repeated the study 7 years later. During that time, those who call themselves Christians dropped nearly 8%, driven by declines among mainline Protestant and Catholic congregations. Non-Christian faiths inched up ever so slightly, just over 1%. At the same time, though, Americans who say they're atheist, agnostic, or so-called religious nuns jumped by more than 6%, making the nuns now nearly 23% of the population. 3 Christian U.S. senators, 2 Democrats and 1 Republican, recently talked about this change and the role faith plays in their jobs as elected leaders.
I've struggled in 22 years in public life for sort of how to be a religious person in the world that I'm in. And what I've decided is I should just be authentically who I am, and much like I would share that I'm interested in the Kansas City Chiefs or love baseball and camping, if I would share that, or if I would share that I'm married and have 3 children, why wouldn't I share the most important thing about me?
Oklahoma Senator James Lankford says the nation is becoming increasingly uncomfortable with expressions of faith.
I tell people all the time that faith is faith when it permeates every part of who you are. If your faith only matters to you on weekends, that's really not a faith, that's a hobby. And you can have a hobby, that's okay, but if it's a faith, it affects how I treat my wife, it affects how we treat each other, it affects how I drive, it affects how I interact with other people. It shouldn't be something that I hide because I was elected.
As people of faith and lawmakers work through these issues, the senators agree open dialogue is critical.
People will say you're either for religious liberty or you're for gay marriage. Or they'll say if you support religious liberty, then you're anti-gay. And they want to take that and just pull that apart. And that is factually not who we are, nor where we have been as a nation. And I think that is a very precarious road of constricting speech.
Putting people in a box, Lankford maintains, silences people of faith and stops important conversations. With the growth in millennials choosing lives without faith, Senator Chris Coons worries about religious literacy among non-believers. He says an individual's right to exercise their religion must be on equal footing with individual liberty.
As long as we can continue to lift up the importance of individual religious free exercise, and that it deserves an equal footing with a civil society where we respect individual liberty, we're at least asking the right questions.
And fortunately, those best principles do show up in the research. Devout Christians are actually reading their Bibles, sharing their faith, and praying together more today than they did 7 years ago. Senator Kaine says we're blessed to live in a country where both sides can talk about these issues civilly. That keeps America as a beacon to parts of the world where there is no peaceful approach to separate religious beliefs.